The handshake that changed everything, the hall of the United Earth. Assembly was filled with a silence so heavy that every breath felt louder than it should have been, and the tension sat in the air like a storm, waiting to break because today was not an ordinary day. It was the day when, for the first time in history, humankind would meet face to face with the great star voyagers who had been watching the Earth from above for years unknown. No one in the hall could ignore the weight of the moment. Leaders from every nation sat together in one chamber, their eyes fixed on the shimmering gateway at the far end, where the alien ambassador was soon to appear. The chosen human representative stood among them, nervous yet steady, his hands slightly trembling, though his heart beat with a strange calm he could not explain. He was not a soldier nor a politician, but a man selected for his ability to remain patient when others grew heated. His nature was simple yet trusted, and that was why humanity had pushed him forward to be the first one to extend peace to the visitor. He felt the eyes of thousands upon him, and he felt the weight of millions watching through screens across the planet, and he knew that, with every step, he would be carrying not only his own life, but also the hope of his people. The doors opened with a sound like thunder rolling through stone, and all heads turned as the ambassador entered. The being was tall and graceful, with a form that shone faintly, as if light was born from the skin itself. The presence was both beautiful and terrifying, a reminder that this was not a creature of Earth, but of the endless stars. The ambassador walked with slow movements, each step precise and calm, as if rehearsed across centuries. And yet there was also a flicker of hesitation, as if the visitor, too, understood how fragile this meeting was. The moment came when both stood before each other. The human and the alien, the world and the stars meeting at last. There was no translator, yet the eyes that looked into one another carried a depth of meaning that words could not hold. The human raised his hand, a simple gesture taught in childhood, a handshake, the symbol of trust and peace, one hand joining another as proof that no weapon was hidden. The alien hesitated only for a moment, then extended her hand, and the chamber grew silent as the two hands met. What should have been a simple touch became something else entirely. The air trembled faintly, as if the room itself had drawn breath. A strange warmth passed from palm to palm, flowing through the human's arm like fire, yet not painful, only heavy with meaning. The ambassador's body shivered, her eyes widened with something between awe and alarm, and a whisper escaped her lips, in a voice that quivered, though no one else could yet understand. She pulled her hand back, but it was too late. Something unseen had already passed between them, something that went deeper than gesture or ritual, something that carried life itself. Gasps filled the hall, though most thought it was simply the strangeness of alien biology, a small shock from unknown energy. But the ambassador staggered for a moment, before steadying herself and placing her other hand against her chest as if guarding her heart. She looked at the human with eyes that no longer seemed calm, but burdened with knowledge, ancient and fearful. The silence of the chamber was broken only by her voice, soft yet echoing in every corner, as if the walls themselves carried the sound. She spoke words that none of the machines could translate, yet every listener felt them within their bones. The human representative stood frozen, his mind a storm of confusion, for what had he done other than shake her hand? What meaning did her reaction carry? Why did the air feel charged, as though lightning had just passed overhead? Leaders whispered among themselves, unsure if this was a sign of insult or acceptance, yet the ambassador's expression made it clear that this was not what she had expected. She did not withdraw or accuse, she only looked at him with a gaze so intense that he felt as though his soul had been weighed in a balance and found different from all others. The meeting moved on, but in truth, nothing else mattered. The handshake had changed everything, and though the ceremony of words, treaties, and promises continued, the minds of those present remained chained to that single moment when skin touched skin. The human returned to his seat, his hand still tingling, as though some hidden spark remained alive within his veins, and he wondered if anyone else could feel it. He caught glimpses of the ambassador across the hall and saw how she rested her hand against her abdomen now and then as if guarding something. Unseen, the crowd outside cheered, thinking peace had been achieved. But beneath the smiles of leaders and the applause of billions, a quiet unease lingered. Something had happened, something beyond diplomacy, beyond tradition, something no one could yet explain. And though the ambassador spoke no more of it, her eyes carried the truth, a secret that only she seemed to understand. When the ceremony ended, and the alien delegation prepared to depart, she paused once more before leaving and turned her gaze to the human representative. For a moment the hall seemed empty, the noise gone, and the world reduced to only the two of them, standing across a silent space. Her lips moved, a whisper carried only to him, and though he could not understand the words, the tone was heavy, with warning and fear. Then she turned away, vanishing into the glow of her people's ship, leaving him, shaken with a sense that destiny had placed something upon him that he could neither escape nor deny. That night the human could not sleep. The image of her eyes burned into his mind, the echo of her whisper haunted his ears. He replayed the handshake again and again, trying to convince himself that it had been nothing more than a ritual, nothing more than a symbol of peace. Yet deep inside he knew the truth was larger, darker, and far more dangerous. Something had begun. In that chamber, something no one could control. Discovery and fear. Days passed after the historic meeting, and across the world, people celebrated the success of the first contact between humankind and the visitors from the stars, while governments praised the moment as a great victory, and the media spoke endlessly of the handshake that symbolized unity. Yet beneath all the smiles and proud words, the one who had shaken hands with the ambassador carried within him a quiet unease he could not shake. At night he often woke with the strange sensation that his veins pulsed with something foreign, and during the day his thoughts returned again and again to the look in the ambassador's eyes, that moment when shock and fear had taken the place of calm grace. The ambassador herself had remained in orbit aboard her vessel, and the reports of her health were kept hidden from public eyes, but whispers began to leak from those aloud near her chamber. She had withdrawn from most of the diplomatic duties, her body undergoing changes no one could explain, and her aides grew silent when asked questions. It was said she no longer appeared in public, but remained under medical observation, guarded and watched with care. At first humans assumed that perhaps the air or gravity of Earth had unsettled her body, yet the truth soon grew harder to ignore. Weeks later, the secret burst open like a storm when the medical council of the visitors declared that the ambassador was carrying new life within her. The announcement spread like fire, and disbelief shook every corner of Earth. The idea was impossible, for her people had long lost the ability to bring forth children, their bloodline weakened by centuries of distance from natural birth, and for generations they had lived with sorrow of slow extinction. Yet here it was undeniable, her body carried the signs of life, and the one impossible answer was that it had begun the moment her hand touched the hand of a human. The hallways of Earth. Governments erupted with confusion, leaders demanded explanations, and military officials feared biological trickery. Was this a hidden weapon, a manipulation designed to bind humanity to alien control? Or was it truly what it appeared to be, an accident that broke the boundaries of two species? The human who had stood in that chamber now found himself dragged into endless questioning, his every movement analyzed, his every word weighed. He insisted with all the strength of his voice that nothing had been done beyond a handshake, yet suspicion circled him like wolves around prey. God, in the eyes of many, he was no longer only a man, he was a carrier of something unknown, perhaps dangerous, perhaps miraculous. His own people looked at him with fear, while others looked with envy, and yet within his heart, confusion was the loudest voice, for he could not understand how his touch alone could awaken life in a being so different from himself. He thought of the ambassador, often remembering her calm presence and the way she had held her hand against her body in those final moments before leaving. Earth. Now he wondered if she had already known what had begun inside her. The ambassador herself broke her silence at last. In a private meeting with her own council and the human representative present by demand, she revealed that she did not consider this event an accident nor a crime but a sign. Her people had wandered too long without the gift of new generations, and their history was filled with grief at their fading numbers. For centuries they had searched the stars for answers but had found none until now. She declared that within her grew a life that was not only alien and not only human, but something between, something new. Her words shook the chamber. Some of her own kind whispered in awe while others spoke in horror. To them the thought of mixing with another species was unthinkable, an insult to their pride and purity. Yet the undeniable truth lived inside her body, and it was beyond denial. She spoke calmly, yet her eyes burned with strength as she said that this child must be protected, not for her sake alone, but for both peoples, for this was proof that survival was possible. Fear spread quickly among humans as well. Religious voices rose warning that the child was unnatural, a violation of sacred boundaries. Political rivals argued that the child would become a weapon, either to enslave humans or to destroy them. Crowds gathered demanding that the truth be hidden from the masses, while others cried out that the child must be revealed as a symbol of unity. The world trembled with uncertainty, and in the center of it all stood the human, whose only crime was to extend a hand of peace. He struggled to carry the weight now placed upon him. He had been an ordinary man before this moment, chosen not for power or genius, but for calmness and trust. Yet now he was branded as father to something the world feared and could not understand. He felt guilt rising in his chest, guilt for bringing chaos and fear to his people, guilt for the storm that now raged between two civilizations, and guilt for the life inside the ambassador, though he had never asked for it. Yet when he thought of that life, he felt something else as well, a strange warmth and instinct to protect it, though he had never seen it. The ambassador's presence became stronger in his mind each day, as though the link formed in the handshake had not faded but deepened. He began to sense her thoughts at night, faint whispers of calm urging him to stand firm. It frightened him, yet comforted him as well, for it meant she did not see him as enemy, but as partner in this strange fate. When the councils met again to argue over the future, she stood by him and declared before both species that the man was not guilty of harm, nor trickery, but chosen by destiny, whether they understood it or not. Still the question of the child remained. Would it be a bridge or a blade? Would it unite the races or shatter them apart? Extremists on both sides began to grow louder, demanding that the pregnancy end before it threatened the balance of power. Yet for every voice of fear, there was also a voice of hope whispering that perhaps this was the path toward survival, a chance that could not be ignored. And in the middle of all noise, the ambassador sat calm, hand over her growing body, eyes steady upon the man who had unknowingly changed everything with a single touch. Tension between two worlds, the days that followed were restless and heavy with unease, for the secret was no longer fully hidden, and whispers spread across the world like fire in dry grass. Some spoke of hope and new beginnings, while others spoke of danger and betrayal, and in every corner of Earth and every hall of the alien council the same question burned louder each day. What would the child mean for the future of both races? The ambassador remained within guarded chambers, surrounded by her people, who watched her carefully and argued endlessly among themselves, while the human representative found himself living under constant observation, unable to walk freely in his own city as guards trailed him and reporters begged for words he did not have. Leaders met in long sessions behind closed doors, but even those meetings ended in shouting and fear, one side demanding that the truth be controlled and hidden, while the other insisted that the world must prepare for change. Human generals looked at the unborn child and saw only a weapon that might be used against them, an unknown power that could grow into a threat greater than any army. Alien leaders looked at the child and saw either salvation or shame. For some believed it was the gift they had prayed for across centuries, while others thought it was corruption that would stain their people forever. In the middle of these storms, the ambassador remained strangely calm. She refused all suggestions to end the pregnancy. She declared again and again that the life inside her was not a danger but a miracle, and she would protect it no matter the cost. The man who had been chosen for the handshake stood by her side when aloud, though his heart shook with uncertainty, for he had not chosen this fate, and yet the gaze of the ambassador always reminded him that fate had chosen him instead. He felt torn between the voices of his own people who feared him and the quiet bond growing stronger each day between himself and the ambassador who carried what no one else could carry. The bond was not only emotional, but something deeper, almost physical. At night, he dreamed of stars he had never seen and awoke with the echo of her voice in his mind, as if the life inside her was reaching outward, connecting them both with invisible threads. It frightened him, but also filled him with an odd sense of belonging, as if for the first time he was not only himself, but part of something greater than he could understand. He did not tell others of these dreams, for he knew they would call it madness, but he knew within that it was real. Outside the chambers, unrest grew louder. Groups of radicals began to march through the cities, declaring that the child must never be born, warning of curses and destruction. Others gathered in the same streets, chanting that the child must be born and protected as the savior of two peoples. Fights broke out, violence spread, and for the first time the handshake that had begun with hope now threatened to tear apart not only two civilizations, but also the fragile peace of Earth itself. Inside the council's pressure mounted. The human side demanded that the ambassador be moved to a secure base under Earth control, but the alien council refused, declaring that she would remain under their protection. Arguments grew to threats, and ships in orbit prepared their weapons. Though no shots were fired, yet the tension was so sharp that a single spark could have set the skies ablaze. The man at the center of it all could do little but watch as the storm raged around him. He longed for the days before the handshake, when he was no more than an ordinary man unknown to history, living a quiet life without the weight of two worlds upon his shoulders. Yet when he thought of the life inside the ambassador, he felt that leaving or escaping was no longer possible. This child was not only hers, it was his as well, and with that truth came a responsibility he could not abandon. One evening, when the halls had grown quiet and most of the council had left their endless debates, the ambassador asked to see him in private. He entered her chamber with unease, yet she greeted him not as a leader or a representative, but as something far more personal. She placed his hand gently upon her body, where life stirred, and for the first time he felt the faintest motion, like the flutter of wings inside her. He stood speechless while her eyes held his, and she whispered that this life would not only survive, but change everything that their peoples feared and hated, but this child would be the bridge they could not destroy. In that moment, he realized that she was no longer only an ambassador carrying the burdens of politics. She was a mother, and he was a father, and no council or army could erase that truth. The thought frightened him, yet also filled him with a strange, fierce strength he had never felt before. Perhaps he could not control the storms outside, but he could choose to stand for the life inside her, and if he must stand alone, then he would. The world outside did not grow calmer, instead it grew harsher as rumors of plots and assassinations reached the halls. Some believed extremists were already planning to strike before the child could be born. Ships patrolled the skies, weapons were armed, secret meetings whispered of plans to end everything before it was too late. Yet through it all the ambassador remained steady, her hand always resting upon her body, her gaze always meeting his, as if reminding him that no matter how loud the storms became, the two of them carried something stronger than fear. And as the days moved forward, the man began to understand the truth. that this was no longer a story of treaties or politics, but a story of survival of bloodlines of futures entwined by accident or destiny. He understood that both humans and aliens might choose war, but he and the ambassador together held the only chance for peace, though it came in the form of a fragile unborn child. The breaking point the night was heavy with silence, though. Silence was not peace, for beneath the calm surface, danger moved like shadows waiting for the right moment to strike, and both humans and aliens knew that the storm which had been building for weeks would not be held back much longer. The ambassador rested in her chamber, guarded by her people. But even within the high walls and locked doors, there was no true safety. The man chosen for the first handshake remained close by, his presence no longer ceremonial, but necessary for. He felt within his bones that enemies would come and that he would be forced to stand between them and the fragile life that grew inside her. The councils argued through endless hours until their voices turned hoarse, yet no answer came from their debates, for one side demanded control and the other refused, and in their stubbornness, they created the very gap through which fear crept. While leaders quarreled, others planned in the shadows, and when whispers of assassination began to reach the ears of guards, it was already too late, for the plans had taken root. It began with a power failure, sudden and sharp, the lights dying across the facility, leaving only emergency glow that flickered across the walls and cast long twisted shadows. Guards rushed to stations, but confusion broke their order, for the attack came from within. Those who had sworn loyalty now revealed themselves as traitors, guided by fear of what the child's birth would bring. Shots rang in the hallways, alarms screamed through the night, and the ambassador was hurried from her chamber, escorted by the human who refused to leave her side, even as the walls shook with violence. The escape was frantic and desperate, through corridors lit in red, their footsteps echoing with urgency. Behind them, the sound of battle roared closer with every passing moment, and ahead, the path twisted through hidden tunnels built for moments of crisis. The ambassador moved with difficulty, her strength weakened by the weight of her burden, and her breath grew heavy with pain, yet her resolve never broke. She pressed forward, her hand clutching her abdomen, as though to shield the life inside. The few man supported her, urging her onward, his heart thundering with fear, but also with determination, for he knew if he faltered even once, she and the child would be lost. Explosions shook the ground, dust falling from the ceilings, and the air thick with smoke and screams. The man pulled her through narrow passages, guiding her toward the safe chamber hidden deep beneath the earth, while behind them, the traitors closed in. He felt the sting of fire graze his arm, as weapons struck too close, yet he did not stop, for he knew that if he fell, everything would end. They reached the lower chamber, sealed with heavy doors, and the ambassador collapsed against the wall, her body trembling with strain, her face pale, yet her eyes blazing with will. She whispered that the time had come too soon, that the child was pressing to be born, and fear gripped him, stronger than any weapon, for he had no skill, no knowledge, only his hands and his heart. The air outside shook with the pounding of traitors forcing the door, their shouts echoing through the chamber, promising death and silence, yet inside a different struggle unfolded, one far deeper than war. The ambassador cried out in pain, her body convulsing as life pushed toward the world, and the man held her hand steady, his voice trembling as he begged her to stay strong. He felt helpless, yet he refused to let fear rule him, for he understood that this was more than birth, it was the turning point of two civilizations. The noise grew louder, the door beginning to bend under the force of attackers, yet at the very same moment, the cries of the ambassador rose to their peak. The man held her steady, guiding her as best he could, whispering words of courage, though his own soul shook with terror. Time lost, meaning every second stretched into eternity, as pain and chaos clashed within the chamber, and then, at last, a sound broke through, clearer than alarms, and louder than weapons. The first cry of new life filling the air. The child was born. Small, fragile, yet radiant, with an aura neither human nor alien, but something greater than both. The ambassador collapsed back, exhausted, tears streaming down her face, not of pain, but of relief and awe. The man stared at the child, trembling, as he held the tiny being in his arms, and in that instant, all fear seemed to fade, replaced by a warmth so deep he could not speak. The child opened its eyes, and in the glow of those eyes he saw the reflection of both worlds and something beyond, something that promised a future not yet written. The door crashed inward, enemies stormed into the chamber, weapons raised, but the sight before them froze their steps, for the cry of the newborn echoed with a strange resonance that pierced the hearts of all present. The light from the child's eyes shimmered across the walls, casting shadows away. And in that light, men who came to kill lowered their weapons, their faces pale with awe. They had come to destroy, yet now they stood unable to move, as though the fragile heartbeat had stripped away their anger, leaving only silence. The ambassador, weak but fierce, rose upon her knees, declaring that the child had been born not of war, but of unity, and that no hand would bring harm to it. Her voice, though weary, carried power, and in the stillness even the traitors felt its weight. The man stood by her side, holding the child, his gaze burning with defiance, ready to give his life if needed, but also knowing deep inside that this life would not be destroyed, for its very existence had broken the will of those who sought to end it. In that hidden chamber beneath the earth, a miracle had taken place while above the skies still threatened war, yet in that moment a pause had then created a breath of silence in which hope was no longer only a dream, but a living reality. The child cried once more, the sound rising through the corridors, carrying into the ears of guards and soldiers alike, and with it came the realization that the world had changed forever, and nothing could erase it. A new dawn. The chamber still echoed with the cry of the newborn, while the smoke of battle clung to the air, and the broken door stood as witness to how close death had come. Yet none dared move against the fragile life now resting in the arms of the man who had once been ordinary and unknown. The traitors who had stormed the place with fire in their hearts lowered their weapons and stared as if they had seen something far beyond their understanding, for in the glow of the child's eyes they no longer saw an enemy, but a truth they could not deny. The ambassador, weak but unbroken, leaned against the wall, her voice soft, yet carrying strength, as she declared that this life was proof that the two peoples need not die apart, that unity was not a dream, but a living heartbeat, now breathing before them. Her words seemed to sink into the silence, and even those who had come to kill bowed their heads, unable to resist the weight of what they had witnessed. The man holding the child felt his own heart surge with courage, for though fear still lingered, he now understood that destiny had chosen him not to destroy, but to protect and guide. When the soldiers of both sides finally arrived to secure the chamber, they found no battle to fight, but only silence heavy with awe and eyes fixed upon the child. News spread quickly through every hall, every ship, and every city that the impossible had come to pass. The ambassador had given birth to a child neither fully human nor fully alien, but something greater, and with that birth the tide of fear began to turn. Crowds that once shouted for war grew quiet. Leaders who once threatened with weapons now spoke with hesitation, for they too felt the truth pressing upon them, that killing the child would not end the storm, but only ignite one greater while protecting. It might give both peoples a chance at survival they had never known. In the days that followed, the world watched with bated breath, the ambassador recovering slowly, her strength returning, while the man remained always near her side, caring for the child with hands that trembled yet never failed. He had never imagined himself as father, and yet now he lived every moment for the tiny life that gazed at him with eyes that seemed older than the stars. Each time the child looked at him, he felt not only the weight of responsibility, but also the warmth of love deeper than any fear. And though the councils still argued and politicians still schemed, he knew in his heart that nothing would make him abandon his place. The councils of both species gathered again this time, not with the same fire of anger, but with a cautious respect for the truth they could not ignore. The ambassador stood before them, her body still weak, yet her voice steady as she held the child for all to see. She told them that this was not the end of their peoples, but the beginning, that fate had given them a bridge, and if they rejected it, they would fall into darkness forever, but if they embraced it, they would rise together stronger than before. Her words pierced through the halls, not as orders but as truth, and even those who had sworn never to accept began to falter in their resistance. The man spoke as well, though he was not skilled in speeches, nor trained in politics. He spoke with the simple honesty of one who had seen death and chosen life. He told them that he was no hero, no warrior, no leader, yet he had been given a child, and he would protect that child with his last breath, whether the world stood with him or against him. His voice trembled, but his eyes did not waver, and the hall grew silent, for the strength of his truth struck deeper than any weapon. Slowly the tide shifted. Leaders who had once called for destruction now argued for protection. Extremists who once demanded war now found fewer willing to follow them. Ships lowered their weapons, troops stepped back from the edge, and though mistrust still lingered, the first threads of peace began to weave themselves again. The child had not spoken a word, yet had already changed the course of two civilizations. Time passed, and though danger never fully faded, the storm of fear gave way to cautious hope. The ambassador healed and grew stronger, her presence once more a pillar among her people, while the man learned to live not as an unknown face, but as a father and guardian. The child grew quickly each day, revealing small signs of strength that belonged to neither race alone, and each sign reminded all who watched that something greater had been born. Scientists studied with awe, priests prayed with reverence, and ordinary people whispered of miracles, for they all understood that their future had taken a turn no one had foreseen. One evening, as the sun set across the horizon, the ambassador stood with the man upon a balcony overlooking the city below, where humans and aliens now walked side by side, not as enemies but as neighbors, cautious yet curious. She placed her hand upon his shoulder and told him that she had once feared extinction more than death, but now she feared nothing, for she had seen hope with her own eyes and held it in her arms. He looked at her, and though he had no words to answer, he knew in his heart that she was right, for the child had given them more than survival, it had given them meaning. As the night fell quiet, the child stirred and reached out a small hand, grasping the finger of the man, and he felt the warmth spread through him like fire, not of destruction, but of life. And in that moment he knew that no matter what storms might come, he would never falter, for he was no longer only himself. He was father to the bridge between stars, and that truth would carry him until his final breath. The story of the handshake had begun as a simple act of peace, then twisted into fear and near war, but now it ended with a new dawn, where two peoples looked not with suspicion, but with wonder at what they might become together. And as the first light of morning broke across the world, the man held the child close. The ambassador stood beside him, and the people of Earth and the stars alike understood that humanity's future was no longer uncertain, for it had already begun, beating in the fragile heart of a child who carried both bloodlines within.